After $140 million in funding in nearly 2 decades, why is Goop still hemorrhaging money? I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Welcome back to Social Currency. Today, we're talking about something that has been fascinating to me, the current state of Goop. Now, I know what you're thinking. Goop, the overpriced wellness brand that sells vagina candles? Yes, that Goop. But here's the thing. Gwyneth Paltrow basically created the modern wellness industry as we know it. She gave us the language of clean living, toxins, and aspirational wellness that everyone from your Instagram influencer to your cousin now uses. So today we're going to unpack what's really happening behind those Instagram perfect Goop stores that, in my opinion, don't even need to exist in the first place. We'll talk about the beauty brand that's struggling to gain traction, the surprising success of Goop Kitchen, and what Amy Odell's explosive new biography reveals about Gwyneth's leadership style. Plus, we'll get into the bigger question, in 2025, does Goop even need to exist anymore? So let's start with some context, because Goop's origin story is pretty incredible. In 2008, Gwyneth literally started this as a weekly newsletter from her kitchen. She was just sharing her recipes and lifestyle tips with her friends. And fast forward to today, we're talking about a company that is valued at a few $100 million, with retail stores in some of the most expensive real estate locations in the world, a full beauty line, a clothing brand called G-Label, supplement lines, a podcast. She even had a few Netflix shows. And here's where it gets wild. According to reporting from Puck News, after 17 years and all of that investment, Goop still is not profitable. Not just we had a tough quarter unprofitable, like hasn't turned a profit for the full year ever. And look, I get it. Building a brand takes time, but 17 years with $140 million in funding, that is a lot of time. And I have a feeling that their fancy retail stores in very expensive areas are not helping with this profitability issue. So now author and newsletter writer Amy Odell recently came out with a biography called Gwyneth. And it's all about her. And it gives us some really fascinating insights into how we got here. One thing that stood out to me is how Gwyneth's acting background actually has helped her as an entrepreneur. As Amy puts it, she can remember what to say in a meeting, and Gwyneth executes it flawlessly like she's performing a script. That charisma is how she convinced some of the most impressive investors in the US. There's Lightspeed, Fidelity Investments, Greycroft to back her vision. But here's where it gets complicated. Being great at fundraising and being great at running a profitable business are two very different skills. Multiple sources in these reports describe Gwyneth as someone who can be cold, aloof, and icy. One person literally compared her to Anna Wintour. And unlike other celebrity brands that bring in experienced executives to actually run the operations, Gwyneth has insisted on staying CEO and being involved in day-to-day decisions. This isn't a Skims-like situation where Kim Kardashian has Jens Greed running the business side. This is Gwyneth trying to be both the face and the brain of the operation, and based on these reports, that's very likely the root of the problem. Let's talk about what's happening right now because the tea is scalding. So last fall, about a year ago, Goop was in the headlines for all of the wrong reasons. Goop laid off 18% of its 216-person workforce, followed by another round of layoffs in November. Now, that news wasn't exactly surprising to anyone who knew the status of the business, but over the last 6-ish years, they've created several verticals across the company that all have their own issues, minus one seemingly solid one. First up, there's Goop Beauty. On paper, this should be working. Clean beauty is huge. The wellness beauty crossover is exactly where the market is. Gwyneth has built-in credibility with this target demographic. So why isn't it working? According to Puck's reporting, Goop Beauty's US sales at Sephora were only in the six figures for the entire month of May. Now, to put this into perspective, some of Sephora's top brands can do double-digit millions in revenue in a single month. For reference, Hailey Bieber's Rhode did around $200 million in 2024. Goop's brand apparently never supported Sephora in a big way, meaning that they prioritize driving traffic to their own website instead of helping Sephora to succeed. And here's the thing about retail partnerships. They're relationships. So if you're not supporting your retail partner's success, why would they prioritize your brand? To me, this feels like a cop-out. You're telling me that the brand didn't realize that they needed to support Sephora? Something seems off, and it feels like they just weren't able to drive enough interest in their products to generate sales. Now there's some potentially good news on the horizon with this business, though, because Goop Beauty is apparently launching at Ulta Beauty, which could be a smart move. Ulta operates twice as many US stores as Sephora and represents how people actually shop for beauty. They mix high-end and drugstore products. And next up, there is the fashion line. So someone told reporters that the Goop clothing line called G Label could do $20 million this year, and allegedly last year it grew 42%. But here's where the story gets really interesting. While beauty is struggling, Goop Kitchen, their prepared food service delivery, is apparently thriving. They've raised an approximate $15 million from investors, including Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, who is also in the cloud kitchen space. The Goop Kitchen revenue from 6 ghost kitchens throughout the greater Los Angeles area grew 60% last year. But here's the problem. Investors didn't put $140 million into Goop for them to build this meal delivery service. They invested in the idea of a scalable lifestyle empire. And meal delivery, while profitable, can have natural limits on how big it can get, especially at their price point for $20 salads. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is their leadership. According to reports, Goop has been going through some serious changes. The CTO and EVP of Brand and Communications both left last year. They don't currently have a CMO or president, and there are conflicting reports about whether Julia Hunter, the consultant brought in to turn around the company, is even still working there. The other issue is focus. Goop has tried to be everything: beauty, fashion, supplements, content, retail, food, wellness events. But as one investor told reporters, they don't think that the company should have ever raised more than $20 million, because when you raise that much money, it basically allows you to spend in pursuit of growth at any cost. So let's zoom out and talk about what all of this means, because I think Goop's struggles tell us something bigger about where we are culturally. When Goop launched in 2008, the wellness industry was much smaller. Gwyneth was a pioneer in talking about clean living, about being mindful of toxins, and the connection between what we put in and on our bodies and how we feel. She basically created the language that the entire industry now uses. But here's the thing about being a pioneer. Other people learn from your mistakes and then do it better. We now have brands like Rhode and Summer Fridays that understood from day one that you need to focus, you need to prioritize profitability, and you need to empower your team. As Amy puts it in an interview with Rachel Strugatz from Puck, wellness is now a $6.3 trillion industry. That's bigger than the global pharmaceutical industry. And Gwyneth helped to create that. But creating an industry and building a sustainable business within that industry are two very different things. There's also the question of whether we even need Goop anymore. When it launched, there weren't a lot of places talking about wellness in an aspirational, luxurious way. Now, every influencer, every beauty brand, every lifestyle publication has adopted Goop's playbook. The clean beauty space alone is crowded with brands that learned from Goop's mistakes. They're more focused, more digitally native, and more profitable. And many of them are founded by people who understand that being the face of the brand and being the CEO of the brand require different skill sets. So, what happens next for Goop? There are a few scenarios that could play out. First is they could keep going as they are, continuing to lose money and hoping that something clicks. But there are a lot of investors who are very much itching for an exit because they've been invested in this company now for well over a decade. They could get acquired, but I honestly think that's quite unlikely given that the company still seems to be in somewhat rocky territory. Gwyneth also shows that she's willing to walk away. She previously said that she would never return to acting, and now she's filming her first leading role in 15 years. She's in a film called Marty Supreme with Timothée Chalamet that's coming out at the end of this year, and there's always the chance that she could become less involved. The third scenario, which is most interesting to me, is Gwyneth actually letting someone else run the business. Bring in a proven CEO, focus on the parts that are working, like Goop Kitchen, and stop trying to be everything to everyone. There's a possibility that not many people talk about, which could be what Gwyneth wants. And that is, Gwyneth could be happy with her business as is, and she knows that she's not trying to build the next Unilever. Maybe she's content running a lifestyle brand that breaks even, gives her creative fulfillment, and maintains her cultural relevance. But if that's the case, she probably should have raised over $100 million less than she actually did. And here's what I keep coming back to. Gwyneth is one of the most influential entrepreneurs of the last 20 years. She created an entire industry. She changed how we talk about wellness, beauty, and lifestyle. She proved that there was a massive market for aspirational wellness content and products. But influence and business success are not the same thing. And at some point, when you've raised $140 million and haven't turned a profit in 17 years, you have to ask yourself whether the business model actually works. So thank you for listening. That is our show for today. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and let me know your thoughts on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and just DM me. I respond to every DM. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.